keynote speaker also mentioned, and like some of the conversations that have been going on, you recognize that we are really challenged, especially in the realm of media practice, whereby somehow the definition of truth has become something nebulous, and we are having a situation where we have to distinguish between facts and alternative facts and stuff like that. So, and this panel is uniquely positioned to really look at this from different dimensions. We have John Pavlik from the academic side. He is a professor of media studies from Rutgers University, and of course, to my right, also Elisha, who is an editorial page editor with the New York Post. And of course, Mala herself is also into image making, advertising, so to speak. And there has been this argument as to whether advertising is really, you know, is there any truth in it? Because the idea is that they want to market something. So sometimes there's a lot of ethical issues in advertising, and also bringing it together with the media. Sometimes we mix news and commercial, and it's sold to the audience as if it is pure news, which is an issue also of interest to some of us in the profession. So without much ado, I'd like to start. Do they say, okay, I'm a man talking, so this is the most diverse panel anyway. And ladies first after men, or ladies first? I don't know, okay. So.
All right, I'm going to read off my phone a little bit. I hope that's okay. I'm a pretty fast talker, so I will try to slow it down for you. But anyway, so, you know, talking with you, Chenna, he was asking me to talk about how the media gives voice to the voiceless, how we cover war and genocide and all of those fun things. And simply, we don't do it well, I don't think. Not anymore. We are more willing to listen to the loud and the noisy, and I'm not just talking about the President of the United States. But as he was saying, I work for the New York Post editorial board, and you know, at some point this week, our letters editor, and she fields all of the readers' response to stories, looked at me and said, "We've had a massive shooting, and in my inbox I have a handful of letters on that. But I have over 30 on Jim Acosta's row with President Trump in the White House." You know, so it's a small example, but if we care more about a petty fight than an atrocity on our own soil, imagine how little we'll care about the Rohingya. You know, Maria was talking about that earlier. They're a small Muslim majority in Myanmar, being slaughtered, mercilessly killed, beheaded, homes razed to the ground, shot. No one's really talking about it. Sure, this was over a year ago, and the slaughter isn't really going on now like it was, but there's still 700,000 people displaced. You know, the United Nations and the State Department at the end of August put out a report saying that the military generals should be tried for war crimes. But still, hardly anyone's talking about it. We only care for a short news cycle, in my opinion, and while the story's hot. And if it's not going to get hits and clicks, then we're going to move on. It's kind of an unfortunate reality. We need to sell the papers, we need to get good ratings. We fight for the innocent, in my mind, only when it's hot. Sorry. You know, earlier this month, the New York Times got a lot of flack for publishing a photo of a 7-year-old Yemeni girl dying of starvation. She's since died. Her name was Amal. But, you know, they weren't so outraged about war that in 2018 a young girl can die from starving to death, but they were upset that a newspaper dared to put that truth on the cover. Because, you know, while war still sells a little bit, it's not as hot as a loud president. So I think that we need to do better. I think that we must do better because lives are important and they matter, and, you know, we just need to do better, in my opinion.
Okay. Professor Pavlik.
It's really loud. Oh, fast, sorry.
Am I okay?
Oh, yeah, use this one.
Yeah, okay. All right. Turn that one on. Thank you. Luciana, thank you so much. Thank you for your insightful comments. And I appreciate having a few minutes to share my thoughts on this vital topic. So I want to start with the assertion that truth exists. But I want to add that it still matters, and that it is to what in law, justice is the end that is sought. It's truth that journalism is in pursuit of. The problem is that for human beings, we can never know truth directly. We have to infer it. You know, we have 5 senses that we know of, right? Maybe we have others, but we're conscious of 5 senses, and we use those senses to somehow engage with the world around us. And journalists make use of those senses, especially a couple of them, to try to somehow discern what is happening in the world. And you know, when you follow this path, it's one that's very fraught, and it's increasingly fraught with contestation. Now, that's not to say that we haven't had contestation in the past. I've talked to my students about Galileo, 5 centuries ago, suggests that the Earth isn't the place that everything's revolving around, that we're actually revolving around the sun. Well, the powers that be didn't like that idea, and he was put under arrest, house arrest for the rest of his life for saying something that didn't jibe with what the prevailing powers were. Now, back then, the contestation happened, but it was between very few parties who had, great power. And today, is it really any different? Some people suggest that with the internet and social media, we have the ability to have a democratized system of communication, but the reality is that there's what some of my colleagues study and call hegemony, that still exists. You still have, in the United States, political powers that can control and dominate the discourse and may use these very connected technologies. But when I look at the case that you alluded to with Jim Acosta, okay, maybe the event itself is sort of navel-gazing. It's about a sort of inside baseball for journalism, but maybe it represents something bigger. Maybe that's part of the issue, is that we're in an era where we have a president who can dismiss reporters so easily for trying to do their job and then ban them, and despite having a constitutional protection for a free press, and can make that part of the system of control so that there's less opportunity for journalists to ask questions, or in his case, maybe make more of a statement than a question. I'm not sure. But I think maybe it's partly that bigger issue. But I think for journalism going forward, if journalism is going to be a place where we can move toward the truth, I think we can't fall into that trap that maybe Jim Acosta and some other reporters have been falling into, which is if Trump gets in your face and calls you the enemy of the people, don't respond in kind. Don't fall into that trap of getting into some sort of emotional, ideological battle with him. You're not going to win it, for one thing. But more importantly, I think in the long run, you're going to undermine the credibility of the journalistic institution, whether it's your specific organization or the broader institution in general. I think for journalists now, we need to adhere more than ever to the highest standards and ideals of what is excellence in journalism, and to maintain our independence, to maintain our impartiality. That's not to say that we're going to be completely without bias. I always talk to my students about the preamble to the Declaration of Independence in the United States, which starts with the line, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." Well, a speaker earlier today said, truths can't be self-evident. Well, I don't know, maybe sometimes we can think of them as being self-evident, but journalists can't rely on self-evidence to establish the truth. Journalists have to go out and identify facts and use reliable sources, and increasingly use all of the digital tools that are available. So that means using artificial intelligence where it's appropriate. It means using omnidirectional cameras and creating immersive stories. It means using all of the tools that are available to us. If you go back 200 years ago, reporters basically only had the tool of talking to somebody and writing it down. Then photography was invented in the form of the daguerreotype, later moving pictures and wireless transmission and radio, and things keep evolving. We need to use all the tools that are at our disposal to tell stories. I was thinking about how for journalists, you can write a very provocative headline, all right? And there were a lot of very provocative headlines after the midterm elections. Some said, the blue wave washes over America. Another one said, no, it's just, the blue wave is just a ripple. And then another one was much more straightforward that I saw. That just said, Democrats recapture the House, Republicans increase majority in the Senate. Now, maybe that's not as sexy as the shorter, more punchy kind of headlines, but probably more truthful in that sense. And then we can use all the tools to provide depth. So if the individual citizen clicks on that headline, they can get all of the narrative that's behind it and can explore the data interactively, immersively, and come away with a more nuanced and contextualized understanding. And we talk about giving voice to the voiceless. One of the problems is that many people around the world simply have very limited access to the network to get their stories out there. I think increasingly journalists can work on becoming part of a global journalistic network that would engage citizens around the world, and especially would do so in terms of connecting with youth. I think if you want to look at who's probably the most, sort of marginalized in any part of the world, it's always young people. And if we can use the tools to engage young people, start hearing their stories, and start encouraging them to become sort of citizen reporters around the world, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to start giving more voice to the voiceless, and then begin to sort of move closer to an understanding of the truth.
Thank you very much. Mala is the Chief Executive Officer of Targeted Advertising Group, actually based in New Jersey, and we would like to hear your perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I often hear the words truth sort of associated with the advertising industry, but in point of fact, the advertising industry does seek truth. Advertisers spend millions of dollars doing research, empirical research as well as anecdotal research, and they use that research to tell the truth about a consumerism issue. Now, advertising certainly isn't known as the bastion of morality. However, those truths do represent real people's needs, wants, and desires as it regards products. Advertisers then listen to what those truths are, and they turn them into engaging slogans and jingles and messages to get that advertiser's product or service out there. And so we do give voice to consumers. It's not the most ethical, but we do give voice. Advertising also mirrors society and helps in expanding the acceptance of social and cultural norms. For instance, advertising, if you look at TV advertising now, you'll see a lot of mixed race couples, and quite frankly, I think advertising commercials show more mixed race couples than there might actually be in the United States. But they do that in an effort quite altruistically to sort of expand the acceptance of those kinds of norms. Advertising has given license to black women accepting their natural hair. They saw that truth being out there in a small way. They magnify it by putting it on national television, and as a consequence, advertisers have made black women more able to be their authentic selves as they show the authentic black woman to their audiences. Now, a lot of times when you talk about advertising, you have to also include our clients who we live in service for. Most recently, I don't think I've ever been more proud to be an advertising professional than I have recently. In our era where truth is assaulted daily, advertisers have been the ones that have filled the moral void. Corporate America has filled that void. When Charlottesville happened, the CEOs of Merck and Disney and HP resigned from President Trump's business councils, and it caused those councils to collapse. When the Parkland High School shooting happened, Walmart and Dick's they changed the age of who could buy guns in their stores. I guess most striking has been Colin Kaepernick and his relationship with Nike. Colin Kaepernick took a knee at the NFL games to protest black treatment by police in their communities. Our president took that, turned it around and said, "You're not respecting the flag." Colin was summarily fired, was unable to get another job in the NFL, and essentially he lost his job because of his principles. He lost a very good job because of his principles. But Nike hired him. They hired him because of his principles. It fit quite well in with their Just Do It campaign, and he had just did it. He had said for a lot of people by his taking a knee that this was an important issue and it needed to be raised, elevated. He chose that forum because he knew the forum of the NFL and the games would get the kind of awareness that was needed to get that message out. There was a huge backlash against Nike. A lot of people on the right were burning their Nike athletic wear, burning Nike athletic shoes, but it backfired. Nike had one of their best years. They made $6 billion after hiring Colin Kaepernick. And we talked a lot this morning about machine learning and predictive analytics. Certainly in advertising, being able to predict behavior has always been a dream. We're now able to use machine learning and predictive analytics to do just that. But again, those tools will be used in service of commerce. Those tools will be used to serve, I think, a higher priority when corporate America is able to fill the void when there is a morality gap in our country.
Okay. So, well, right? So, and there were some other people who sort of like stepping out and stuff. So we can just go into a Q&A, and if you do have questions. But I just want to say something about this concept of truth and journalism as well, and even credibility of the media. I was telling someone, I was out of the country speaking to a group of journalists sometime last week. I learned something that, and when the keynote speaker said something suggesting that it looks like attention seeking is the greatest commodity we look for now, really. The click, the ratings and all that. So, and there is this female journalist, well, they call her a journalist, but I really don't know whether I should call her a journalist because she's making a lot of money. I understand Google pays her probably $30,000 every month or so. And I said, how? So what he does is that he stays in his little room, copies all the newspapers and creates a website, he puts it there, and people are advertising because it's popular and people are clicking and clicking and clicking, and that brings a lot of returns for her. So I thought that was plagiarism, and it's unethical in journalism, but it looks like it's paying off, and if there is she doesn't even make any effort to find out whether these reports that she's copying and pasting, whether they're authentic or not, but she's profiting from other people's work. So, and that's the world we live in. So there is something perhaps for us to think about. So, having said that, if there are comments or questions, then we welcome that. Otherwise, we would like to listen to the Minister of Justice from Uganda who's just going to talk about truth, really. And Olga will be doing that.
Yeah, I just have a question. I guess I'm a little confused about advertising. I mean, in the examples that you gave with the corporate executives that resigned from the president's councils or Nike, is it because those individual corporate executives, including Nike, made a decision on, for their own reasons, that this is what I think our corporation ought to do, and I'm not sure what that has to do with advertising.
Well, it has to do with advertising because a lot of times they make those decisions because of their buyers, the consumers. That colors a lot of actions by an advertiser. So they, Nike, for instance, they know that they have a large African American constituency. So for them to reach out to Colin Kaepernick, who has fallen on the sword, if you will, for a black issue, that's where the connection between the advertising and the corporation, because advertising is the link between that consumer and the corporation.
I guess I would have a problem calling that altruistic. Because I think that those, the way you're describing it is, I guess what I thought all along, is that those corporations are making a profit and loss, determination of what we should do on this issue. It's not because, the way you're describing it, it is not because they believe in what Kaepernick is doing.
I would disagree.
Okay.
Because if they didn't believe, they wouldn't have, put him on a giant billboard on the side of a building on 3rd Avenue. So there is this juxtaposition where the belief and the action, as well as what the potential outcome of doing something, what the payoff is. And they bet that by siding with Kaepernick, there could be a big payoff. And they were proven right. $6 billion worth of right. So, worked out.
Yes.
Okay, Pace University, Rutgers University, and CUNY. I'm a researcher, educator, artist, and entrepreneur. Okay, so to whom much is given, much is expected. I like that Dr. Plavik talked about the fact that the truth exists, and now more than ever, it's very, very easy to report the truth, but it's also very easy to manipulate the truth. And advertising is very, very based on psychology, and yes, it does reward the society. The media and advertising have changed. In terms of now, it's more integrative. It's more, it's not just seeing an ad. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be many, many things, right? And it's so much easier for anyone really to become an influencer or become an advertiser. Okay, so I do wonder about the role of responsibility. I mean, earlier you mentioned that a 7-year-old girl was reported as she stabbed. Okay, okay, so we have this sensationalism, right? So the stories that are reported are these kind of stories that are reported. The communities where they actually help the children, or what was done about it after it happened, all we just report these headlines. What happened after? We usually don't follow it, okay? So it's really, really the expected song. I'm obviously, well, maybe not obvious, I'm Nigerian as well. I'm also an American. When it comes to advertising, the media, the way minorities are painted in the media, it's changed a lot. Usually because people in the communities, like the hair beauty community, they actually took on and became the advertiser themselves, they became the influencer themselves. That's why it changed, right? It changed a lot. Doesn't really change in the mainstream, it changed a lot, right? So when these news are being reported, when the bad news happens, that is more interesting, that it's reported, okay? There are certain things that happen in the community, certain backlashes that happen, that is, we have to be very mindful that when we create these images, right? When we send out these images, send out these messages, there are consequences, okay? And we need to follow up on the news and also report if something good was happened, something good was done. And also, we also have the need of being highly more innovative with the good news, or innovative with reporting. Because at the end of the day, there's too much news out there. People are getting more bored easily. So if the news is not fabricated or it's not enhanced in any way, most people will not even remember the news. Okay, so I wonder what your thoughts on that, or how you think we could better advertise or train the society, maybe with advertising, maybe with media, so that they could better discern or honor the good news that is out there.
You know, that's almost a two-part question. Part of it was like, advertising and perhaps benefiting from bad news. Your ad is, beside the image of a child starving. We don't necessarily, and we don't create the news. We use those forums as a channel. So we can't predict, what is going to necessarily be beside our ad or the commercial that's going to follow it. Now, I have in my long career in advertising pulled advertisements when I know that there's something bad that happened, perhaps related to the industry that I'm in. I would call up the radio station, call the television station. You couldn't do it a lot of times in magazines because their lead time is so far ahead to do print. But certainly with digital, now being able to very quickly change a message, we will pull back when we can because we don't want our client's product associated with bad news, if you will. The other part of that, again, is sort of like a journalism sort of question. And so maybe I'll let you answer.
Sure. Is this one, that one? Yes, thank you. It's a very interesting question, very important one. And I'll just speak a little bit to the question about good news. I don't think that, and I don't have data to prove this point, but I don't think that most journalists are necessarily predisposed to want to report bad news per se. I think that there's some challenges with the concept of good news that make it very difficult to do it at a level where it would become the dominant thing that you'd see when you encounter the news. Because historically, much of what we would call good news was being generated through public relations or publicity or some sort of persuasive dimension of, say, industry or some other entity. And they didn't want the whole story out there. They just wanted whatever they considered to be the thing that would make their organization or their product or their service look good. So journalists had to be very skeptical whenever they get a news release or something like that, because they don't want to just be, passing along something that may be giving you a very limited portion of the truth. The thing that's there might be truthful, but it might not give you the whole story. So I was talking to somebody, I was a colleague of mine from CBS News. He was talking about sort of the legacy of some men's hair coloring. And there was this product called Grecian Formula, and it's been around for decades, and it's just recently in the news again, because it turns out that the way they're dyeing your hair from gray to black is it's got lead in it. And your hair slowly absorbs it, and it gets into your skull, and it can be killing you. So Grecian Formula never wanted that fact to be out there, okay? So, that's part of the, there's a great challenge in how do you tell these good stories without being manipulated, But you'll see frequently stories that will say, some new medical breakthrough proves that coffee prevents dementia. Terrific. Well, who would want to know if that's true? The problem is, how do you really know if it's true? Well, one thing you've got to do as a journalist, you've got to make sure that whoever funded that study wasn't the coffee industry or something like that. All right, and so that's part of the problem is you don't want to be, if you're news media, you don't want to be manipulated into reporting things that are only a half-truth or mask something that's really problematic. So that's, you know, I think most journalists would like to have more positive stories, but it's very difficult to sort them out in a way to know that you're presenting things without being manipulated by whoever's sort of putting the story out there. So that's part of the problem.
Part of what you said is that we should follow up, that we need to follow up, but I also think that that's on our readers as well, right? You know, we've kind of become so, you know, get the clicks, you know, get the traffic, and if that sells, more of that. I don't like it necessarily, but that's kind of where we are. So if you want to follow up on a story, if you want more of some story, read more of the, you know, that kind of thing, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Do I have a moment?
Okay, yeah, it's right.
Yeah, thank you. Because we talked a bit earlier about AI and data and that. And, you know, in journalism, traditionally, the fact is one of the key foundation, you know, building blocks that everything rests on. And really, there are sort of 5 types or groups of facts that journalists rely on. And it aligns with these 5 W's. The who, the what, the when, the why, and the where. All right? And it seems to me that if journalists, and they're kind of going in this direction, you look at, there's more news media that are developing what they call data journalism, and they're bringing data scientists and people who are computer scientists into the fold. I think if we could have even more of that collaboration between journalists and people who are really, you know, coming out of data science or information science, we could begin to more systematically assess the facts that we have, and stories could get a score. How many facts do you have in this story, and how reliable are they? And then you could compare one story with another story, one news organization with another news organization, and the consumer, I think, could be really well served by seeing that, hey, this site does a really good job of introducing a lot of facts that they have thoroughly tested and checked out, and I think people would gravitate to that, knowing that this is a place that really